Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from Treaty 6 territory. Our panel is gathering from across the country on ancestral territories that are home to many diverse groups of Indigenous peoples. And we express our gratitude to the Indigenous communities that share the lands where we live, work, learn, and play on every day. My name is Rebecca Kragnes, Director of Indigenous Relations and Community Engagement with Bird Construction, and I will be your moderator for this panel discussion on retaining women in the construction business. Women account for 50% of Canada's population, and while some traditionally male-dominated industries are showing success in attracting more women into the fold, the overall picture in construction shows that we still have a lot of work to do in recruiting women and then retaining them once they're employed. These professions offer viable long-term careers. Everyone here with me today is proof of that. So how do we help employers become more welcoming and create a culture more inclusive of women? To lend their perspectives and provide actionable insights, I'm pleased to welcome our panelists. Kelly, Stephanie, and Monique, thanks for being here. Before we start, how about you each take a minute to say hello? Kelly, let's start with you.
I'm Kelly Kienleitner. I work on the west coast of Canada. We are on Coquitlam, Musqueam, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. And I love it because I'm Métis. I work with all of them. It just makes me so proud and so happy to know that and we have a very large Indigenous within our own within our apprentices, which makes me really happy. But I'm a double red seal. I've been around forever. I'm old as God, and I've been, I was the first woman in my first trade. Trust me, I can tell you about keeping women in the trades.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Next, Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie Hunn here, Business Development Director at Flatiron, Canada, and also very active in a lot of the women in construction initiatives and associations, which I'm pleased to share about later in our discussion.
Awesome, thank you. And next, we'll introduce Monique.
Hello, everyone. My name is Monique Buckberger. I'm District Manager and Vice President in the Toronto District for PCL. I'm one of 3 district managers that oversee the business in Toronto and the Southern Ontario.
Thank you, Monique. I'll start with you. Tell us a little about your work and how did you get involved in construction?
Well, that was almost 28 years ago. I'm a civil engineer by training. And when I came out of school, I was looking for a job in the mid-90s, and I was fortunate enough to have someone direct me into the construction industry and into PCL. I landed there by starting in the field and spent a number of years in the field on bridge projects. And then after experience in the field, I moved into the project management stream. And I think what really kept me engaged was every day was a different day. It was there was always excitement happening around what I was doing, and no 2 days were the same. I also, throughout my career, have had several different opportunities, and one of them was to be chief estimator, and then move on to operations manager and some other different roles along the way. All are connected with the ability to be mobile and work in different environments and have such a diverse experience from the different roles and the different locations that I was able to work in.
Thank you. Kelly, what attracted you to the skilled trades?
Reality is that I'm a military kid who did a hitch in the military, because we all do. My parents wouldn't let me get a trade in my 20s, and I did what I was told. I went into admin. I spent finance. I hated it. Mid-30s, middle of a divorce. Decided that I'd go into trades. It took me a long path, but yeah, that's literally my mid-30s. Like, I got a kid, I got to provide for him. I'm not going back into an office. I want something different. I need something different. I can't do the same thing every day. And trades has been just this amazing. I mean, literally, I went from welfare to $100,000 a year in trades. That's why I chose trades. That's why I've stayed in trades. That's why I want women to get into trades. Is that conversation. Welfare to where I am now. I own my own house, for God's sake, in Vancouver. And I love the trades. I adore this world. It's changing all the time. There's always new stuff, especially for electricians. We constantly learn. And for somebody who is a little ADHD and a little dyslexic, it's a really good thing for me.
I wonder if ADHD is a prerequisite for electrical, because I
think it's our superpower. Well. I seriously think it's our superpower. I think we all have it on some level.
Yes. And Stephanie, what attracted you to the construction industry?
Yeah, so I realized after having spent lots of time in the environmental and civil engineering side that, you know, there's a lot to be unearthed, you know, in construction, especially as a woman of color. That's something I'm very passionate and I like to advocate for, is seeing more representation amongst visible minorities within the construction realm. So I thought being involved, you know, going back into construction would be a great opportunity to help promote and do so.
Thank you. We heard today about how vital attracting more women to roles in the construction industry is. But once they join, how do we keep women on board in a culture where they remain a significant minority? Feeling like you're part of a community goes a long way. We've heard a lot of conversation, especially in the last panel, about some of the challenges women face in the skilled trades industry. How do we take that and help women in various sectors to promote the women in trades? And Stephanie, can you tell us a little about women in infrastructure and how involvement in groups like that can play a role in retaining women in construction?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of belonging in associations. I think sometimes, you know, employers might not have the programs specifically catered to women quite yet. And so we have associations like Women in Infrastructure or Canadian Construction Women. And for example, Women in Infrastructure, you know, they've been around for some time. It's nation, so it's coast to coast. We have programs such as We Win, which pairs you up during a 9-month program between female mentors and mentees. And then we have something called the awards program, which recognizes female accomplishment, whether you're an emerging leader or you're an outstanding leader. And, you know, the fact is it's such a great way. It's safe space. I've heard that actually spoken about all day today, you know, safe space. How do we create conversations in a safe space? Where can we pitch our ideas without judgment or ridicule before bringing it back into our workplace? How do we, you know, there's lots of women before my time, you know, before and those to come. How can we, you know, help kind of give them that and nourish that relationships and help give them that confidence to bring some of that passion back into their workplaces as a woman in construction.
Great response. Any of the other panelists have experience with groups like this or results that you can share with us?
For us and I belong to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I'm actually the chief instructor here in Vancouver, and we manage all of the about 900 apprentices currently in the construction center here in the Lower Mainland in the union. And for me, one of the biggest things is having a women's committee within the union. Literally having, and we were the first local in Canada to get a women's committee. So, and there was this, and it caused some problems. The boys had a couple of issues with us saying we wanted a women's committee. And we basically pointed out as women, we needed to talk to each other because there's things that only women can get information from other women about. We love the guys. I mean, we all work with men and I adore them. But reality is, as a female, sometimes there's just stuff you just have to ask another woman about. And for us, having our women's committee has been amazing because it's a place where they can come with questions and they're accepted. And you don't have to be a woman to be in the women's committee. It's literally, if you're an advocate for women, we want you to join the women's committee. But it's made a massive difference, even just within my own local and the women in my local, and our numbers have gone up because we did that. Right, we've got 7% journeys and 17% apprentices are women right now.
That's awesome.
So we've worked our butts off for about a decade to have this happen and support the women so they'll stay.
Yes. Employee resource groups are a great way to build community. We just launched an Women at Bird and Indigenous
Nice.
at Bird employee resource group and Pride at Bird. So we have some really great resources where I think those safe places, we keep coming back to safe spaces, and ability to share your thoughts openly is so important without judgment.
And especially as a woman in construction, and I love men dearly, I'm married to one, but God, they want to tell me how to do things. And all I want to do sometimes is vent. And I can go to the women and go, okay, blah, 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 blah. And the women will go, I've heard that, I get it, yay. And we move on, which for me is such a blessing. Because as the first woman in my first trade, I didn't get to talk to other women. So my second trade as an electrician, I am committed to having women talk to other women.
I love that idea. I also think, and maybe I'm stepping outside of the box here a little bit, but work accommodations. We had some conversations at some of the large camp structures about creating women's networks at the camp. I think that would be such a great idea to support women.
I've worked in camp.
Away from home.
I've spent weeks not talking to women. Do you know how awful it is as a woman not to talk to other women? It's horrible. I was talking to grocery store clerks because I just wanted to talk to another female. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, moving on. In a male-dominated culture, women are often faced with unconscious bias, that unspoken prejudice or narrow view that implies certain tasks or roles or responsibilities maybe aren't a good fit for women, or experiencing casual sexism and the old boys attitude in the workplace or job site. I know I've heard many times women don't belong in trades. When I was a young tradeswoman, that I was taking a man's job or preventing someone else from taking care of their family. And I always took it back to, I need to take care of myself and my family as well. So don't tell me where I belong. Kelly, I understand the Electrical Joint Training Committee has set up a goal of getting women to make 20% of its apprenticeship program, and you just said you're at 17%?
Yes, ma'am.
So how is that going? And what do you think you've seen with respect to women staying in the profession after their apprenticeship?
Well, I mean, what really has made a difference is that because for a lot of us, you will be the only woman on site. So there's stuff will happen and you'll go, is this me or is this what just happens in construction? And being able to go to other women and say, hey, I had this stupid person say this stupid thing. Do you have that? Yes, I have stupid people saying stupid things. Because we as women get so, and I say this lovingly, we get so in our heads about stuff, and being able to go to somebody else and say, hey, this happened, am I nuts or is this bad, is an amazing thing. And for me, that's what it starts out in the school. We've got a couple of female instructors, including me. The girls see other women in the trades. We try and make sure that if they need anything, so I get phone calls at all hours of the night and day, but that's because I've made myself available. But the women amongst themselves within my local have really, they babysit each other's kids. They back each other up. If somebody needs rain gear and they don't have rain gear, they put a note into the Facebook group and somebody gets them. It's just this amazing collaborative community that we've built.
I was actually thinking about the Facebook communities because I belong to some of those women in trades Facebook pages, and there's so much support found in social media as well. Yeah.
Well, because you're not alone, because as the first woman in my trade, I was alone. There was no one else to just, is this normal? Do other people do this? So having another female just to talk is so valuable. That support is just so ridiculously valuable. Whether it's at Monica's level, which is insane. I bow to you, madam, because good gracious, I couldn't have done that. And Steph, same conversation, right? I'm white, I don't look Métis. It's easier for me to fit in. But I've seen all the nonsense that goes back and forth. And it's nice to have the girls be able to, and I've had women phone me and say, Kelly, somebody just said this to me. What do I do? And I'm like, well, you could be nice and say this, or you could be like me and say that.
Well, I completely empathize with you, Kelly, as being the only woman on a construction site. That's exactly how my career started. I was showing up and there was no other women there, and there's a I had a bit of a decision point to make. Do I want to use this and use it as a platform to move forward and treat myself almost like a differentiator. And at that time, I probably wasn't thinking that, but it's continued on, and I've been able to leverage that. And what I'm so grateful now is that when I walk into a meeting room or a boardroom, I'm not the only woman anymore. And that's, it's just not one or two of us. There's more women out there. And that's one of the great things that's happened over the 28 years that I've been in construction, is that we've been able to grow. And it's a lot to do with establishing the networks, showing that there's other people, other women doing these fantastic roles. When I first started, it was the first network that I joined was Women in Trades and Technology. And I was going and speaking to high school students, and it was so empowering to see that these young women that were coming through the high school years, that they were as passionate about the things that they were doing as I was. And we just have to continue to foster that.
We have to stand beside each other. We have to hold each other. I always say that at this point, and Monica, and you and I have been in the trades about the same length of time, I consider now my job is to put a hand up, not a hand out. So my job is to look at the women behind me and elevate them, because at some point I'm going to leave, and I need to elevate women so that when I walk away from my senior position, that there's somebody just like me, but in different skin, who can step into my place and hold this place so that we don't go backwards. Because that's what I find. If we don't keep pushing forward, we tend to slide a little backwards. That's what I have found. We have to keep fighting.
I agree. Stephanie, do you have any other examples that you would like to share about creating a culture of inclusivity?
Yeah, similar to Monique and Kelly, I think we need people, women that are in senior positions, like Kelly's saying. We need to tap into some of the women that don't put their hand up, that are ripe for promotion, especially those that English might not be their first language. They may have linguistic barriers, maybe even cultural sensitivities, where they come from a place that that might seem boastful to continue, promote yourself, because promotion, that can be seen and contrived in so many different ways. But yeah, I would say, just taking more of an effort to really help cultivate and breed the next generation of leaders.
Great. One reason for women leaving the construction industry is they don't see a career path, a place for advancing in management and leadership. Monique, perhaps you can share more about your path and suggestions on how we can get more women into leadership roles in industry.
Well, I think when I was moving through my career, especially in the early days, I would always be asking for the opportunity to do things and the opportunity to work on these different jobs. I wasn't chasing a title or a promotion or a position. It was more of, that was what was a driver for me. One of the things that we're doing to help promote women in construction and women in leadership roles is through a sponsorship program. And this is something that we have been doing for a couple of years now. And the engagement level with the women that are involved in the sponsorship program is super high. And having the ability to have a sponsor and know who your sponsor is, so that they're speaking about all the great things that you're doing on your behalf when you're not in the room, is empowering. My sponsors and it's the sponsors that I've had have all been men, just because of the situation that I was in.
Yep, me too.
But and they were so giving of their time and very, very supportive. That is what's occurring in our sponsorship program as well. So we've got this amazing group of sponsees that are teamed up with sponsors, and it's a mix of both men and women as their sponsors. But it's something that is almost like a bit of a game changer for these young future leaders, to have somebody that they know is advocating on their behalf.
role models and mentors are so
models.
important. I think I probably said that about 5 times this morning.
Yep.
Is there any other comments from the panel on the role of role models and empowering women in the industry to take on those leadership roles?
Just having senior management understand that we're capable of it. Because I don't know about you guys, but I was raised in a generation where we weren't given opportunities because we were going to leave and have babies. And that whole brain set has to just go. But for me, it's really mentorship. You have, because how in the world do you navigate this world if someone doesn't show you how? This is a weird, convoluted, I mean, I always say the construction sites are organized chaos. How do you navigate that chaos if you don't have somebody who's been there before? How do you know not to do the dumb things that, you know, and that's just for me, it's just, you know, having somebody ahead of you saying, okay, here's how you want to do this. And I just like Monique, I've always had men, always, because in my first trade, I was the first woman. And in electrical, when I started in the early 2000s as an electrician in my second trade, it was still very heavily men. There weren't that lot. I mean, I remember being a geek on job sites when I saw women. There's a woman.
That's
it was
funny.
creepy.
Stephanie, do you have anything to add to this?
Just that, you know, yeah, just that I think don't underestimate informal you know, mentorships as well. Sometimes they could be from a different sector, and but share a lot of times, even in mentorship programs, you know, we're not talking about the technicalities of the job, you know, like we're not talking about, okay, you know, like how did you approach that project? It's more about just the soft skills and some of the stuff that Kelly talked about and Monique said today, you know, just sometimes it's just a safe space, and it's a place where you can kind of air out your thoughts, you know, and kind of work through and process through some of that emotional thinking.
Absolutely, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Like having that safe space to be who you are and be a genuine person in our industry, because we don't act the same as men, and we've got different mannerisms and different approaches, and it's absolutely okay. I think that's what makes our industry, which includes women, so great, because it's women bring a diverse way of thinking and an approach to problem solving and you know, managing the chaos on the job site. Like it truly helps, I believe, our industry move forward in a better way to have women included.
Yeah,
100%. I think that navigation component is really important as well, especially if you're new to a new organization, having the informal mentorships to help you understand how to navigate, and that will really help create success.
Yeah.
So Kelly mentioned the stigma of motherhood.
And here's the thing, it's daycare. I used to be a daycare provider. I had a coffee truck driver who would drop her infant off at 4:30 in the morning. You find me a daycare that they will do that. Daycare is set up for corporate. Starts at 7, finishes at 6. We don't work those hours. So for me, that is, I had a journey when I had to go get my kid at school, said, well, can't your wah? And I went, my wah? Come on, say it, dude. Say that stupid word you were about to say. Come on. Well, you know, if you were a guy, you'd have a wife. It was like, oh, for me, it's daycare. 24-hour daycare is what we need, because we work ridiculous shifts at all hours of the night and day, and it's not just us, right? But I have a friend who works at SFU as a maintenance electrician. She's late to work every day because their daycare doesn't open till 7. She starts at 7. She's late every day. What kind of an image do you think her crew has of her being late every day? That's the problem. And when we have to leave to get our kids, oh my gracious me. And it's not just us, it's the single dads as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that I know quite a few single fathers.
I know so many single dads, and they get harassed if they go take care of their kids. That's not okay.
No, it's not. Okay. Any other comments, Monique or Stephanie, on how do we normalize that reality of parenthood and that women carry babies, and we should be allowed and permitted and it should be accepted that this is part of our lives, and how do we support women to be moms and still be in skilled trades.
Yeah, I think, from a couple of different perspectives, and Kelly probably can chime in on this as well, because this is where some growth in our industry is in fabrication facilities for construction pieces. And that's a great way for women to enter the construction industry, and whether it's as an apprentice, and have some stability, because there's the sort of the chaos of that Kelly mentioned of on the site and unpredictable hours.
Yep.
But when you're in a prefab facility, you have where you're going to work every day. Yep. Your hours are a little bit more set, and you have a really great environment, safe environment to learn your craft or your trade. Like that's one of the things that I've seen as a differentiator over time, as our as the challenges with our labor in construction continue to escalate. We see that there's more prefabrication facilities that, particularly electrical, mechanical, structural steel, miscellaneous metals. Like there's some really great trades that have that capability and are implementing those areas of work. But I'm going to switch gears from an office side. I'm definitely seeing a lot more shared parenting duties, whether it's men taking paternity leave, or sharing paternity leave with their partners. It's not just the women that are looking after the children anymore, and I think that's something that we all have to realize, that men are also, and it was spoken about here, men are having to go and pick up children from the daycare or drop them off, or it's a shared duty, or they might have to do them both. One of the things that we first experienced is that we were losing women when they went, losing women from PCL when they went on maternity leave. And one of the things that we've talked about and started to implement is having a career discussion right before they go on mat leave. And because then that settles everybody down, it makes sure that the individual knows that the employer cares about them, and going and having those career discussions, and when they come back they can plan for it. So I think it's a really important step, and just sort of laying that groundwork so that the individual that's going away for whatever duration of time feels confident that the environment that they're going to be coming back to or could come back to is a welcoming environment.
Very good. Stephanie, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
You know what? Normalizing those conversations, not being afraid. I'm personally, I am intimidated by, personally scared of saying, hey, got to take a pause in my career. What are the effects? And of course, there's going to be a cause and effect on that. But I think normalizing those conversations and making sure that the employer is okay with having those conversations with you, and there is a shared expectation between employee and employer. I would just say just mindfulness, expression of mindfulness.
Have any of the panelists experienced modified work hours or daycare providers on site, like some unique options besides no.
Although let me just say this, in India they've actually got where they go to the major construction companies like PCL, for example, and when they're doing a big site, they say, okay, can you set up aside a trailer? And this is because in India the laborers take their babies with them and children die on job sites. So in India, these kids go into these ATCO trailers on site while mom and dad are working as laborers, and the kids actually go into a daycare where they learn how to read, because most of the kids in India 50% of the population doesn't know how to read. So for me, if India can figure this out, why can't Canada figure this out? And I mean, I hate the fact of moving my kid from job site to job site, but if it meant I could have easy daycare, or have easy access and maybe go see them during the day, That would probably make me stay at an employer way longer than if I have to put my kids somewhere and not get to see them all day. Just as a parent, and I got a 30-year-old that I started when he was 5. So I've done this whole thing from toddler to grown up. It would have been nice if I could have seen him during the day, right? Just for that, hey, because they do it corporately, right? They put daycares and office buildings. Why can't we, and I know it's construction, I know it's dangerous, but why can't we set up a way we can do this? Just saying.
Yeah, I think some industries might be a little more tricky than others with
absolutely,
the environmental risks. But
God, if India can do it, come on.
They may have different levels of environmental regulations. Perhaps. I'm not sure. But I'm thinking more along modified work hours and how could that support women? I know when I first came back from having my first child, I went from working full-time to working 80%. So I worked 4 8-hour days instead of 4 10-hour days so that I could go home and be home in time for daycare and do all those things that a toddler needs when they're that age. So I think that's a conversation that needs to be have more often.
And the employers need to be able to be okay with the fact that these trusted, valued employees have other responsibilities other than to the employer. And as women, I think we take on a bulk of those responsibilities, usually within households. And that's why this is such a tough decision for us, is because we're the ones that literally things stand on in our families most of the time.
So childcare is a huge barrier.
Massive barrier.
Role models, access to work. What Monique mentioned earlier around those shift schedules sometimes can be hard, or going away to work in camp can be a huge challenge for women with young children. And what are some ways that we could change that so that there's more ability to retain women and they don't feel like they're leaving for 2 weeks at a time? Is there opportunity there to shift and become more inclusive? Do you have any ideas on that, Kelly?
For me, and because I'm a construction worker, it really just starts with the lead hands and charge hands on sites, understanding that things aren't the same, and that the way things were 20 years ago or 28 years ago when I came onto the tools are not the way society is. The fact that my generation theoretically grew up with mom at home. I didn't. My mom always worked. But that whole, and it's like, okay, but that doesn't work anymore. So for me, it's a shift, not only within the industry, it has to be an employer shift. It has to be almost a societal shift where it's okay for us to work, but not give our whole souls and beings to who we work for. I mean, I love construction. I love my job and I love teaching, and that's what I do now. But I watch and I know how much the people who do construction love it. They love building those buildings, be able to stand back and say, I built this, which is, I think, one of the best things ever in construction, whatever trade or whatever job you do, to be able to stand back at the end of the job and go, look what I contributed to, right? It's going to be here after I leave. It's a shift. It has to be a shift. It has to be a shift on the tools. It has to be a shift in the office. It has to be a shift in management's brain. They have to stop expecting us to sacrifice ourselves emotionally and physically to the contracts we're working on. Doesn't mean we don't have to do our jobs. It just means we have to stop. Literally, my son said, you know, Mom, I would have loved to have you home more. And I joked and said I was home for the first like 5 years of your life. Well, I don't remember that. You were never home. You always were at work. So I've got a 30-year-old that believes that I was never home. Do you know how terrifying and awful it is as a mom? That I was never there? Ugh, I hate it. But it's that shift. It has to happen. I did it because I had to do it to get ahead because of the generation I came through in. The women behind me, I don't want them to have to do that. And it's going to take management and leadership to shift things for things to change on the tools. It has. It's got to come from the top. Leadership has to change the way we think about things.
Thank you, Kelly. Monique, how do you feel leadership can contribute to that change?
Well, we've gone from sort of that grassroots uprising and awareness building over the past number of years, and continuing to put up our hands and say, yes, we these are our issues, like even identifying some of the issues in an open forum. I think people are going to take that away and internalize it, and then see, okay, these are some things that we need to address as a leadership group or as a management group. That type of behavior really does come from the top and works down, like, Kelly, you started with the lead hands and the foreman, but they need to hear it from other places, not from the crews that are working for them. It's from the I'm going to say top down. I mean, I get the opportunity to work with some great trade owners, and there's some trade owners there that are absolutely enlightened to the fact that women are completely untapped. Well, I shouldn't say completely, are a significantly untapped labor pool that they want to engage in and have them work with their groups and within their companies. And they're the ones that are making the sort of having the aha moment about, okay, I need to change the way that I approach, whether it's prefabrication or what our job sites look like, or the number of hours that are worked on a project. Can we shift that around to accommodate, start times, finish times? Is there a split crew that, we're, some start earlier and others stay later? Like there's a ton of options out there, and our trade contractor community in particularly is starting to figure it out. And I'm not going to say, everybody, but there are some trade contractors out there that really have moved the needle, and they're finding ways to not only bring women into the industry, but welcome them in, give them that safe space, and give them a sense of belonging and accomplishment that comes with being part of the construction industry. So some trades, I think it's a little bit easier to do that. And I don't think I'm going to name them all, but there's some that we just physically have to be on site, and you're limited as far as what can be done offsite or in another location. But from an on-site perspective, there's also opportunities there as well to modify hours. And from a general contractor's perspective, we do have trades that stagger their starts and stagger when they're finished. So it wouldn't really impact, say, the duration of a day or the duration of a week. It's the same number of hours will get worked. It's just kind of when they happen to get worked. And a lot of times we appreciate that, because if every crew showed up at the exact same time in the morning, you would get flooded with all the things that happen first, at the first part of the day. So there is an effort to actually have trades show up, particularly on large projects at different start times. So we're doing things. Is it across the board? No. But there are places out there that are making an impact and are welcoming to having women work on site in different roles.
I've had a few conversations in my work, especially with the Indigenous communities, with modifying shifts. Not everyone wants to work 14 and 7, and especially if there's something that happens in the community, or there's a death in the community. There's a very different protocol. It's not taking 1 or 2 days off to go to just the funeral service. There's other ceremonies and events that happen. So I do talk a lot with our construction leadership about how we accommodate those things. And I think as long as there's open conversation and understanding of why this is happening, it really changes the dialogue. And I've had some really unique shift schedules and modifications done for specific people, but understandably, not everybody can modify their schedule because there's timelines to be met and milestones to meet. So I understand that. Stephanie, do you have some more to add to this part of the
Yeah, maybe on the offside, on the office side, I think as we're y'all mentioning flexibility, leadership, having that flexibility. But as it pertains to the office side, I mean, there's lots of travel, there's lots of conferences in construction that we go to network and, chase projects and so on. And I think I saw a question earlier there, about sales, women in sales, like, how does that work? Like, how can we still maintain, some kind of work-life balance? And I think what I'm seeing is a lot of actually conferences are now offering hybrid, whether that's a byproduct of COVID, but I think that's interesting to see that there's still some virtual programs and virtual networking that can coexist with in person. And I think that also lends some support and help to our industry. But I'll just say, I think, some flexibility and understanding from leadership that we as women, we also change, young women to before having children, to returning mothers, to, towards retirement. So I think that there needs to be that understanding as well.
Good point. All the phases of life are different, and we bring different skills and timelines during those phases. I want to kind of go back to the creating safe workplaces conversation. And Stephanie, do you have some tips on how to create a safer workplace? We talked about psychological safety and physical safety is huge on construction, but what are some other things that we could do to really create safe places that welcome a diverse employee pool?
Yeah, I'm going to take it back to role models. So, and role models that might look like you, whatever that might mean, whether that's, by age or by race. But I think that's really important because that creates like a connection, and that lends itself to having a safe space, is that connection, right? You feel that you can be honest and genuine and open when you have that kind of connection established. So I would say, having like role models would be kind of really essential to a safe space.
Monique, do you have anything to add to this?
The role models are absolutely important, and I see it through. We're in a bit of a larger district here, and there are so many women role models that take it upon themselves to go out, not necessarily go out of their way, but just to naturally welcome young women and women that are growing their careers along the way into the district or into the industry as well. If we've got a fairly robust student program where we submersed our students right into almost like a full-time role, and that is a great way for us to create an environment where we have to show them and demonstrate that this is a fantastic way to grow a career, make a living, be very engaged in what they chose as their profession or direction that they want to take their careers. So it's a combination, I think, of role models, groups that, like Stephanie had talked about, you see something similar across the table or in the work environment, but it's also in and I'll go on an education piece, educating our managers to, it's not just for the women in the groups, it's also for the men that are in management roles to learn and understand how, we're different, and how to create those safe spaces and create a sense of belonging in the work environment. So I think it's so many components. Like there's not just one, one solution. Like it's all of these things that start to work together and really do help the work environment along. And one or the other is not going to be successful on its own. It's sort of this collaboration of all these things pulled together.
And it's okay to be different. I think
okay,
that's the key message there is it's okay. We all don't have to look the same or speak the same or any of those things. We're allowed to bring that diversity and that our own selves to the workplace. And I think in the past that wasn't always the way. So Kelly, any tips on how we can make
for me, and then I teach first year. So I have first year apprentices. They've never been on a construction site, right? So I get to introduce them. What I love is I will hold the girls to the same standard as the boys personally, because you're an electrician, you're an electrician. I've had girls say, well, but I'm littler, I can't do this. And I'm like, okay, how about if I show you a way you can do this, but you're going to use your body in a different way. So for me, part of this conversation, and Monique is absolutely right, and so is Steph, is there's so much to this conversation. But for me, especially with our tradespeople, it starts out with, okay, when you come into the trade, having the girls, so we've got an Aboriginal class currently right now, first year. Almost half of that class is women. The men in that class, because they have been raised to respect women, are amazing in the shop with the girls that they work with. When I started, there was a lot of, oh, baby, can I do that for you? Oh, honey, let me do that. And it was like, could you just, and I'll do it by myself. What I see now is that the men have been raised in such a way that they actually get that we're valued and that we should be on job sites. Because when I started, trust me, that was, I had some really stupid conversations with men about who should be on tools. And it had to do with gender specific body parts that I pointed out that body part doesn't do the job. And that's where I personally started to break down the barriers. So what we try and foster in first year, and I love it because the kids do this by themselves. They start to watch over each other, right? They'll start to take care of each other and they watch over each other. And if somebody says something stupid, somebody's going to step in and say, hey, cut it out. And that starts with management. It starts with fostering that relationship. But to me, we all have to work together. We all want to go home safe at the end of the day. So collaboratively together, we as a crew and a team in a construction industry have got to figure out a way to work together. We have to, whether it's Indigenous, whether it's women, whether it's you recognize as LGBTQ, whatever it is, it has to be okay that you're that way. And it really, and for me, it starts out with my baby apprentices. Like they're so amazing with each other. And we try and foster that relationship so that when they go out on the tools, that they take that with them on a job site, right? That they're always that it's not just about me, because a lot of people are raised, well, it's all about you and you got to think about you and heck with everybody else. That's not how construction works. Construction is like this. We have to be able to talk to the engineers as the electricians. The trades all have to be able to work together. So this collaborative conversation and understanding that if you stand by and watch something, you are just as responsible for what's happening as the person who's doing or saying those things.
Yes, yes.
That's the biggest piece for me. It's the advocates that stand up beside us and behind us so that we're not standing there alone.
Yeah.
And so the women coming in, and Steph's right, they have to see somebody who looks like them to think they can do it. That's just the thing about women. It is. We have to see women that look like us to think we can do it. It's nuts. Boys do anything. We just go, no, wait. Yeah.
Some women.
Yeah.
I would say maybe it's because I worked with a lot of men my whole life, but I do have that. I don't have to see myself always. I did see women working in trades, but I don't always have to see women in a place for me to feel comfortable anymore.
And you know, Rebecca, that's not really the norm for most women. Most women are raised with, okay, there has to be somebody who looks like me before I can try and do that thing.
Yes.
We have to get them. And I keep saying to women all the time, listen, take a step. I've got a young woman who's about to become the first City of Vancouver inspector. It's 2023. The first Vancouver City inspector who's a female, and she's Asian.
That's amazing.
For me, it's the women who keep taking the barriers It's those young women who take the chances, like Monica and Steph and I did when we were younger. We took those chances. We put ourselves out there. But I think we were all lucky that we had people who stood up beside us.
Yeah.
Right. And for me, it was always men, because that's just what's available. My personal commitment to women behind me is to be that person for them.
I love that. There's a really good question in the chat I wanted to ask you, Kelly. Do you have any thoughts on the burden of women employees have to educate their peers and managers? I think that's like, it's a common question I get as well as an Indigenous person. Why do I always have to educate people on indigeneity?
I know.
So how do you feel about that burden? And do you feel it's a burden, or is it a responsibility? Because sometimes I twist that and I say, well, it's my responsibility to make space for the folks behind us.
Well, and for me specifically, because I was the first woman in my first trade, one of the things I wanted to make sure of was that, and I stepped away from that trade after over a decade because it just got to be too much. My new employer actually walked up to me and told me that none of my kind were going to work for him. Yeah. Yeah. Let me just say that BC Hydro has several female motor winders. That's my first trade. Because of the example I set, my old lead hand went to Hydro and started to run Hydro crews. They now specifically look for women in that trade because the first woman through proved, and I'm not bragging, this is what they told me, was I proved women could do it because no one thought we could do it before. So in my opinion, we have to continually to advocate, and it's exhausting, and some of us get tired of it. And it's like, oh God, do I have to do this again? I've kind of gotten to the point where my job is to kind of educate the dumbasses so they don't say stupid things. And just to help the apprentices understand, especially the women, here's the things you're not going to do on site, because those things are going to get you in trouble, right? And maybe things socially you did before that were acceptable, you can't do those things now as a girl or a woman. It's a learning task for both sides of the conversation. Women have to learn how to work instruction. Men have to learn that, we're capable. And I really think this generation has gotten it. The generation I started with had trouble with it. This generation, almost 30 years later, I think they get it. I really do think this generation of apprentices and engineers and that they actually get this conversation. It's the old that need to. But yeah,
I went through my apprenticeship in the 90s, and I see a huge shift
it's
already,
huge.
But there's a lot more work to do.
Even the people like Monica and Steph, for me, do you know that for years I only ever saw male engineers? I remember the first female engineer that showed up on a job site was a structural engineer. I was so excited. I went and talked to her. She wasn't even in my trade. I didn't care. I was, oh my God, it's a woman. Now it's a woman engineer, which I love. I love that. We've come so far in 28 years. We just got to keep going. That's all.
Do you have any comments to add, Monique or Stephanie, about the burden of women to educate men in leadership about our belonging
and our capabilities?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it's a burden. I think it's for me, it's an opportunity. Like, it's an opportunity to make us better as an industry. And I'm gonna say 99.9% of all men that I've ever had conversations with this are very receptive and are curious and want to know more and ask questions. So we've got a captive audience. Like, there's, I think, less and less people that don't want to have that conversation now. And I think it's through a generational transition that we've got, young men that are raised to see women as equals, and that hasn't maybe been the case in the past when Kelly and I maybe started in the industry.
Even Rebecca.
Well, I mentioned in my keynote this morning that my son started his electrical apprenticeship a few weeks ago,
Oh my God.
and it kind of hit me funny because his blue book came in the mail, and I was like, wow, 28 years later, he's starting his electrical apprenticeship. And it is a twist that his mom is his role model, and he's going out to site and working with a fellow I know who introduces him as Rebecca's son. And he's just like embarrassed. He's like, oh my God, they keep calling me your son. but it is a real shift in that mentality that a young man is following in his mother's footsteps.
That is so amazing. And so, it's great to hear. And, I don't have boys, but I've got 2 girls, and they are both in engineering school now. So it's, getting more and more young women and young men that are of sort of that equity, equal opportunity mindset is important for our industry to transition over time. And it's not going to change overnight. I think, we all have recognized that. But we've made so much progress.
Yes.
Still more to come, but there's been a lot of movement in a positive way in our industry.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely more openness, on the male side, colleagues, more openness. Sometimes they just don't know where to start. They don't know how to enter the conversation, but they want to help. They're certainly great allies, especially some of the younger demographic entering management positions. And I think the other thing too is it's not really a burden. I think if not us, then who? We are the resident experts on all things women in construction, so we can't really expect anyone else to really speak for us on that, right?
Totally. I'm thinking about the general themes of our conversation today, and it was all around like representation and role models, and how do we build more safe environments for women and other marginalized groups on construction sites. And I think there's a lot of progress, and there's a lot of work yet to do, but I'm really pleased by the conversation. It was such a rich conversation, and the takeaways that I have are keep being that advocate, and keep speaking up, and make space for everyone at the table, and be part of the solution. I think that was just written in the chat. I love that. Be part of the solution. And I think I heard in the first panel today, a statement was empowered women empower women, and it's so important for women to lift each other up and support each other in the field and in the office and in life. And I think that's one of the last comments I would like to make today. I would like to thank the panelists for joining us today. I don't know if there's any more questions in the chat. I don't see anything specific. I wish to say happy International Women's Day to everyone, and back to you, Danielle.